Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr. And today we have a really interesting guest. This is Dion Leonard. Dion is an accomplished ultra runner, motivational speaker, and best-selling author, including, and the reason why he's here, his New York best-selling book, Finding Gobi. His incredible journey spans grueling races around the world. He's run Badwater 135. He's run Marathon des Sables. He has run the Grand Slam of 100s here in the U.S. and also the Triple Crown of 200s here in the U.S., just to name a few. Dion's story is not only one of athletic endurance, but also of a resilience, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Dion, thanks for joining us. Let's start this out. Before we get into the story itself, you have an interesting story on how you became an endurance runner. Can you tell us how that story goes and maybe embellish a little bit to make the story better? That's what we runners do, right?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me on the show, Scott and Dan. Don, I'm really looking forward to being here, speaking with you. It really started through a drunken bet late one night with a friend of mine, and he was telling me that he was going to run a half marathon race, and it was about 4 months until the race, and he'd run the race the year before, and he'd done a time of 1 hour 50. And he was telling everyone how hard he'd been training and how he was going to break his time from last year. And I had a few adult beverages early in the morning when he's telling this story, and I started to think I could do this race as well. The problem was I'm over 200 pounds, a pack-a-day smoker, heavy drinker, and I couldn't run for a bus, let alone 13.1 miles. And instead of just sort of thinking I could run this race, I actually said to my friend Dan, I said, I think I can run this race too. And I didn't stop there. I said, I bet you I can beat you at this race, and I'll even give you 5 minutes head start. So, yeah, it was a pretty stupid thing to say, and I didn't remember a thing until the next day when my wife came in and said, hey, you made a really dumb bet with Dan last night. You're going to run and beat him in a half marathon race. So then I remembered actually at that point, everyone was laughing at me making this bet with Dan. And it made me sort of think to myself, well, I wonder how far I can run. And I tried to run around the block, and it was a disaster. I couldn't even get to the first corner without being out of breath. By the time I got back to the house, I realized, like, I'm in really bad shape. I'm putting myself into an early grave, basically. So I thought, well, what if I can just use that sort of negative energy that was around us that night, the people laughing at me, making jokes and saying, I couldn't run for the hills, let alone 13.1 miles. So I decided to take that on. So I go from 1 block to 2 block to a mile to 2 miles. And over time, I start to build up, lose a little bit of weight. Of course, stop smoking, cut the drinking out. We fast forward to race day, and Dan sees me for the very first time since we'd made the bet. So close to 4 months earlier. And he sees me and his jaw drops because I've lost a lot of weight. He realizes the race is on. When the gun goes off, I've got to beat him by 5 minutes. So I take off, start running as fast as I can, knowing that he's always behind me, but I don't exactly know where he is, right? So I push on, I finish in a time of 1 hour 28. I don't know what that means. And I sit there looking, knowing I have to beat down by 5 minutes. I'm just watching my watch tick around. My wife, Lucia, finishes a few minutes later, and then the 5 minutes goes past. So my wife and I are like now high-fiving each other because I'd beaten Dan in this bet. He had to take us out to this fancy restaurant. We're living in Manchester in England. All the soccer players go to this restaurant, so it's going to be an expensive meal. And we're high-fiving because we're getting this great free meal. The thing was, Dan actually beat his time as well. And I felt really good about myself for the first time ever. And I thought maybe running was a good thing for me to continue on with.
What a great story. And since then, you just continue to run. You felt that was the good thing for your body. And I'm curious, did you follow any training plan? Obviously, it sounds like you didn't have a coach, but did you get online and look up what a training plan for a half marathon would be? And did you follow any recommendations?
And that's a really good point. I don't remember, but I guess I probably would have looked up online. And I think probably, this was back many years ago, 2012. Probably Runner's World had something that I used online, and it would have been pretty basic. But yeah, it did the job. And it did lead for me to getting into ultra marathons. It was a bit of a journey as well. I tried running a marathon with my wife Lucia through the French Bordeaux region, and it was a wine marathon, and we had a great time doing that. But after it, I was like, I think I'm done with running. Later that year, I bought her a book for her birthday, and her birthday is the 23rd of December, and the book was the world's toughest endurance challenges. And part of the birthday present was, okay, yep, you can have the book. It's a beautiful coffee table book. But the other part, since her birthday is so close to Christmas, was open up the page, and whatever you open it up to is the event we'll go and do.
Oh, wow, that's a great idea.
We'd had a few adult beverages when I came up with that idea.
There's a common thread here, Dion. Yeah. I'm seeing a theme.
And she opens up to a race called the Kalahari Extreme Marathon, and it's a 155-mile, 250-kilometer, 6-stage, 7-day race. Yeah, across the Kalahari Desert in northwest Africa. It's northwest South Africa. It's very hot. You have to carry your food and kit to survive the week. That was going to be the thing, like, can I make it? And that was the real challenge for us going forward then.
Yeah, my first question is, what is your adult beverage of choice? I mean,
anything really.
Okay.
Yeah, usually beers, and I worked for a whiskey company for a very long time, so I do have a good taste in whiskey. So beer usually leads to fine whiskey. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like, let's get back here. So you would run a marathon, decided I don't want to do this anymore, and the next race you have to train for is a 150-mile self-supported race through the desert in Africa.
Yeah, and we get there, we have all the gear, we have no real idea of what to do. But something just clicks with me out in the desert. I grew up in a really hot part of Australia, so it would be over 100 degrees most days where I grew up back home. So I love the heat. I love it when it's dry. I love being out there all day long. So I found like I wasn't the fastest runner there, but I was really good in hot conditions. And that's something that sort of stuck with me pretty much for the rest of the races I'd continue on with. But as we went through the week, I climbed up through the positions. I ended up finishing in 6th place, and there was professional runners there. There was people there, semi-professional. There's some really big athletes there in the time, and a lot of them looked at me and were like, "Who are you? What's your story?" And that's where it sort of all started, really.
Dion, it sounds like your wife has always been a runner. I mean, it sounds like she's the one that's kind of saying, "Hey, this is how you tie your shoes. You need to buy these kind of shorts." I mean, was she kind of your coach and your inspiration through the beginning of this whole stuff?
Yeah, she's definitely been the one that's led us to continue on and keep going forward. And, someone I massively admire and love seeing her journey. And she does different races to what I do now. And it's really neat to see her crushing it as well. When I find myself like out there in the Kalahari race, I was like finding myself really digging deep to a really difficult, depressive and destructive childhood I had. And for some reason, the running got me into this place where I used a lot of that negative energy and was able to sort of really push through those tough moments, realizing I'd left home at an early age, put myself through school. I'd had a tough childhood. It was actually tougher than a lot of the ultra marathons I'd done. So I used that energy quite a lot to push me hard, throughout the races.
In watching some of the videos for preparation for this, that was mentioned that some of the adversity that you had really allowed you to push yourself through some of these tough races. And you made the comment that, running helps me. It helps me, with my emotions, or however you want to, label that. And I started to think, even for all of us, we all have something. We all have something that we're dealing with, challenged with. There isn't anybody without some of that. Maybe that's why we're all attracted to running. Maybe we're all working through something from somewhere in our past, and that becomes a good tool or a good life experience that leans forward into our running.
Yeah, completely agree. And when I have the opportunity to share my story with other people, it's like I share that difficult childhood. The struggle was real, and I end up finishing school with terrible grades. I go and work in a meatworks for 3 years, one of the most depressing places I think you could ever imagine. This small country town I grew up as well, and I was meant to stay there for the rest of my life and never really go on and do anything amazing. And I became 250 pounds, pack a day smoker, a heavy drinker, and people connect with different parts of the story. Maybe they've had a different childhood, or maybe they've been overweight, or maybe they're doing it for, of course, different reasons, and they see that and they see the journey. And I think that's also the incredible part of life, isn't it? It's a real roller coaster ride, like running an ultra marathon. You have lots of highs and lots of lows.
And maybe that's part of the mutual respect that we have as a community. We all know we have come from somewhere, and we recognize that, and we don't have to identify it. We don't have to wear it on a label on our chest, and we just respect one another. And we know that, well, we probably are working through something or have worked through it successfully. And this running is, part of a tool to allow us to get there. I think that's part of our tight community.
Yeah, and running has been a real mental cleanser for me. I often sort of joke, or I say, I don't even like running. Like, it's not my preferred sport. But I've found it to be so great for me personally, and it has made me such a better person. And through the whole journey, I've experienced that, and I see that in other people, friends that I've got as well. That it's been incredible.
That's a really good point, Dion, and it's one that we have made on the podcast before, but probably should have a make mention of it more and more. And that is, this sport of trail running or of ultra running, endurance sports, it's really open to everybody. You don't have to be a high school cross country phenom that decides to go out and do these endurance events. You can be whoever you are and go out and push yourself and finish these races. And I think that that's a very good point that you've reminded me of. So thank you for doing that. So
Scott,
let's get into this.
Go before
ahead.
You say that, I want to make a comment because it really stuck with me. I don't like running, and I've said that myself, but I love
hard, isn't it?
Say again?
It's hard, isn't it? It's a hard sport. It's not easy, and if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? And I think that's where the element of is I don't like running comes from. Is like, oh my goodness, I'd rather be watching other sport than doing this, relaxing on the couch. But you don't get anything out of that, right? It's all immaterialistic. It lasts a little time. Crossing these finish lines, having these adventures, meeting these people out there, sharing the tough times, learning about yourself out there, changing things when you get back from a race. The benefits just go on and on and on, and that's the incredible part of the sport.
And you said it better than I did. I don't like running, but I love what running does for me. And there's a million things. I feel better through the day. I know I'm healthier. I meet great friends. I solve problems. There's so many collateral benefits besides just running. And there are times that you're running and you soak it all in and you feel like you're running on a cloud and you're looking at the beauty around you and the friends around you. You say, I love running. Those moments I love, but you got to work through some of the others to get to that point.
Yeah. And Lucia is like, my wife is completely the opposite. She loves it. She's singing along and having fun and high-fiving, and she gets a different buzz, and that's cool. Everyone's buzz is different, and that's what makes it great, right? We all have different buzz, but it all brings us together as well.
Yep. Scott, I interrupted you. Go ahead with your question. I'm ready.
No, I wanted to get into this book that you wrote. And I shouldn't say book. I should say books. There's many different versions of this book that we can get into a little bit later, but it's about the experience you had at a race in China. Can you tell us about that race? Tell us the character of the race. It's the Gobi. It's in the Gobi Desert. Tell us how long it is. Tell us about the character that is the race and how you got to the starting line at that race.
Yeah, and that's a really important part of the sort of story too, is the sort of lead up, going from 2013 at the Kalahari 155-mile stage race to then going in 2016 to run the Gobi Desert. Between 2013 and 16, I'd run lots of different stage races around the world. Was a sponsored athlete in 2016, was going out to win races or at least compete to the best of my ability. And I go to the Gobi Desert as, you know, one of the front runners to win this race. Again, another 155-mile, 250-kilometer, 6-stage, 7-day race across the desert, carrying a food and kit to survive the week. Now, the Gobi's unique because it's freezing cold and snowing at night time. Big mountain range like the Rockies out there called the Tian Shan. Snow leopards live up there. And then baking hot, 120, 130 degrees during the day. And it gets crazy wind and sandstorms. So it's a really tough, difficult race. When I go out there in 2016, I'm going there to win. Nothing else is in my mind except that. And I'd become really driven by winning. I didn't really care much else about the community or the people or what I was seeing even during the week. I just was there to win. And I was really just taken away with that. And on day one of the race, like there's 100 runners starting the race, and I'm one of about 5 to 10 people that can win the race. And I take off, gun goes off, I'm at the front. We're running up and over sand dunes all day, carrying the heavy pack. You know, and that pack that we carry weighs anywhere from, I don't know, probably 10 to 20 pounds with all the food and kit. So it gets pretty heavy. Water bottles as well. And then as I'm running up and over sand dunes, I finished day one in 3rd place, about a minute behind first and second. So it was a good start to the week. The real action, though, was happening behind us. 2 American runners running up and over those large sand dunes noticed a little dog starting to follow them. And she'd just come out of nowhere, started running between their feet. They're like, wow, she's kind of cute. And she runs with them 20 miles and finishes day one of the race. So, yeah, it was really unique to see this little dog having run day one. And on day 2 at the start line, I'm ready again. And I go through this real simple routine, making sure my hat's on tight, my glasses are clean, my pack's all done up. Gun's just about to go off, and I'm thinking, right, I want to get a good lead today. Look down, and this little dog's actually chewing on my shoes. And she's like a little Chihuahua Shih Tzu mix. And she's chewing on these shoe covers like the gaiters we put on our shoes. You know, of course, massively helpful in the desert race where you're running through sand dunes at times, trying to stop the sand from getting in there to get blisters. She's going to put holes in them. She's chewing on them, having great fun. So I sort of flick her off my foot and she jumps back on and starts chewing on them again. So now I'm like telling her to go away, you know, scram. She jumps back on, starts chewing on them again. The race is about to start. So I sort of call out, whose dog is this? Someone come and get this pesky dog away from me. And as I do it, the gun goes off to start the race. So now just imagine like all the 100 runners running down the trail ahead of me, and I'm stuck there with this dog attached to my leg. Now, I'm a sponsored athlete wearing yellow shirt, black trousers, and yellow gaiters. The company wanted me to wear this yellow and black outfit. So the dogs, for some reason, just love these yellow gaiters. Finally, she looks up. She sees everyone else running, so she must think, oh, we have to run. So we start to run behind everyone. I run throughout the day. Sometimes the dog's ahead of me. Sometimes the dog's behind me. I don't care, right? I'm just there to catch up to the leaders. And I'm pushing away all day long. As I get to the finish line, everyone's cheering and clapping and playing some drums, and I think it's all for me. When I cross the finish line, the cheering, the clapping, the drum playing gets louder. So I'm like turning around to see what's going on. Of course, it's not for me. It's for this little dog that's running in behind me. And she'd run the like 25-mile stage. Unbelievable, you know, just to see her coming in behind me. And then she came into the tent, collapsed down next to me. And I'm eating some of the food. You know, we're carrying all of our food to survive the week. So it's like nuts, jerky, granola bars, dried fruit, and I'm starting to share some of my jerky with her. This pack that I've got on, that food is like specifically prepared for each day. You know, we're burning about 5,000 calories a day at least. I'm only carrying about 2,000 calories. And, Scott, if you were out there with me and you said, hey, Dion, I need some food, I'm running out of food, like, you'd have to be on your last legs before I'd even consider giving you anything, even a gel, right? Because it's for me, it's like, it's my stuff for the whole week.
Yeah.
There's no shops out there, Here I am giving this dog this jerky, and all the other runners were too. So she was having a great party out there. And that was the start of it. It wasn't until the next day, day 3, I'm running along, and this dog's sort of tagging along with me again. And I have to cross this large river crossing, about the size of a football field in length. I go into it. It's up to my waist in height, and I'm over 6 foot. So it's rushing strong. It's freezing cold. My pack's on, remember. I'm trying not to fall over because my sleeping bag and everything's in there too. It can't get wet. I have first and second just ahead of me, and I'm about to take the lead of the race when I hear barking, yelping, and whining behind me. Now, I know it's that damn dog. I look at first and second, and they're not stopping, and I'm not stopping either because I'm in race mode, right? I'm about to go past them and take the lead. The barking, yelping, and whining gets louder, and I look at them again. They're definitely first and second not stopping. I decide to stop, and I look back, and this dog is running up and down the side of the river crossing, and she's thinking about going in. And if she goes in, she's dead. She's going to get washed away. She's going to drown. So now I'm there thinking, oh, what am I going to do? Do I take the lead, or do I go back and get this dog? And I think, oh, God, I've got to go back and get the dog, So now I'm going back through this water crossing, and I was halfway through it. So it's a long way sort of back. The first and second continue. I'm going back. And now I start to think, oh, I've got to pick the dog up. It's like, but what if she's got rabies? What if she bites my arm off? I hadn't picked her up or touched her. So I kind of pick her up with my arm outstretched to the left, trying to hold her and go back through the water. As I go through the water, though, she has this way of like nuzzling up in my arms. And I look back down, and now it's like I've got a baby in my arms. And she's got these big brown eyes, and she's staring up at me. And I think if she could talk, she'd have said something like, geez, I love you. You're the best person ever. Thanks for coming and pick me up. And I'm looking at it, and I see myself in the dog. And I briefly touched on that childhood, being on the streets and that difficult struggle, putting myself through school. No one cares about this dog. No one loves this dog. Here we are, these two lost souls coming together. I'm like, wow, maybe I was meant to go back and pick this dog up after all.
Wow.
Wow. When we're there's more to the story to hear, and I can't wait, but allow me to make a couple comments here. When we're out on the trail, when things get tough, when you're in pursuit of first and second place, as if we knew what that felt like, but all of a sudden, many things are stripped away, and we become very human, and those emotions are real and raw. We can be honest with ourselves. We're honest with the people that we're running with. It's just a safe spot. And in that moment, things were stripped away, that facade that we may dress ourselves around. You became emotionally attached at that moment to that dog, and a lifetime friendship begins at that stare from eye to eye.
I absolutely love the way you worded that, because exactly, it's a week-long race. You've got no contact with the outside world. You're there on your own. You're having to dig deep. And it's that moment of being raw, as you said, that makes me decide to do what I've done as well.
We talked to people about hinge points in life. The first hinge point that I heard was with you and Dan at 3 a.m. in the morning, making a silly bet that all of a sudden changed your life completely. Had that not happened, then we may not be here having this discussion, or those books wouldn't be sitting on school children's library. Everything happened because of that small bet. That was a hinge point.
He likes to take all the credit for it too. So I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast, because my wife also thinks, well, she's the one that got us to the trail race in South Africa as well. I mean, I can't win.
Yeah, you're never going to get credit for this success. And the next hinge point is that water crossing. That was a hinge point moment too. So there's two strong hinge point moments. So that I've identified in your story. I love it.
And I want to hear the results of that hinge point. Thanks for letting us take a little intermission here to throw in some comments and questions. I'm curious, Dion, were you a dog person before this? Did you have dogs growing up? Did you like dogs?
You don't like running.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, you don't like running, and now you're a runner, right? So I'm
everyone
thinking,
loves dogs. Yeah, no, absolutely. At one point in my life, early on, up until about the age of 5 or 6, we lived in a farm in Australia and had sheep and cattle. So my dog went everywhere with me. There was my best friend. So always loved dogs. Had a Saint Bernard in my 20s. Remember, I'm like 200 plus pounds, big heavy guy. So of course I had a big heavy Saint Bernard to go with it. We were quite the couple, but I didn't really like small dogs, and here I am now worried about picking up this little dog because maybe she will chew my arm off. But yeah, uh, unbelievable just to see her out there. And it's like, what was she running from, or what was she running to as well? And why was she out there? Why did she choose me out of all the 100 other runners, the 50 people out there around the race organization, volunteers? She stuck with me forever there, and we'd finish the race together, and video and picture of us finishing the race went all around the world. Crazy, viral, news channels, even ESPN Play of the Day. It unbelievable. I thought it would make me like a very famous sportsman, but all it did was make the dog famous. So I've known my place in this story for a very long time.
So we dropped the story before we went off on a few tangents. You just crossed the river with Gobi in your arms, and you've identified one another, and you become fast friends. What happens with the rest of this race?
Well, usually I tell people they have to read the book here.
Because
there is so much more to the story. Out of the 101 people that start the race, only about 50 people finish. Someone nearly dies in the race. Someone cheats in the race. We all get evacuated because of a massive sandstorm at one point. And this race no longer exists in China anymore. The year before, actually, an American runner had unfortunately died during the race. So it was an incredibly difficult race. And it was really surreal to have this moment with Gobi out there. And when I finished the race with her, I decided that I want to take her home with me. But at this point, she can't just simply get on the plane and travel home with me. She's not allowed to. She needs to be tested to make sure she doesn't have any diseases like rabies. And that takes like 90 days. And I have a job. I can't stay in China for 3 months. So a lady says to me, I'll look after Gobi for you. You fly back home. And at this point, I'm living in Edinburgh in Scotland. And she says, I'll take her to the vet. We'll get her tested. And then we'll work out how we can get Gobi sent over to you in the UK. So the story sort of takes a bit of a break here at this point. The story goes viral, as I said, and Gobi goes crazy in 2016 about her amazing story. And then weeks later, the lady that's looking after Gobi rings me and says, I'm really sorry, mister, your dog Gobi's gone missing. I don't know where she is. I can't look for her, and basically hung up the phone. And Gobi's now missing in a city of over 3.5 million people in northwest China. And we don't know for how long already she'd been missing. We didn't have any idea where she would be, of course, what state she might be in. And I'm completely devastated, heartbroken, thinking, well, I'm never going to see this little dog again. And my wife sort of says to me, well, that is unless, of course, you fly back there and start looking for her. And so I spoke to my employers and said, hey, the little dog that ran the race with me, she's now gone missing. Would you mind if I fly back there? And they gave me the time off to fly back there and find her. And we set up a search and volunteer team, and hundreds of people come out to help. And Gobi's story goes viral again. Now she's missing. And I mean like crazy. CNN, BBC, lots of different radio stations are covering the USA Today, covering this story. Now the dog's gone missing. And yeah, we're searching through the streets, through the parks. People would often ring and say, hey, we found your dog. Come round to the house. Don't forget to bring the money, because we had a big reward up as well. So we'd race around to their house, and of course they wouldn't have the dog. They were just trying to trick us for the money. And then other elements became involved. We had mafia people involved. The government became involved, telling us they wanted us to shut the search down. And it looked like I was going to go home empty-handed. We just didn't know where the story was going to go to next.
Why, Dion? Why did you go to all these efforts for this dog that you only knew for 5 days?
Yeah, 5 days. And here I am searching through the city. I don't know anyone, can't speak the language. And it was all through that river crossing. It was all through that pivotal moment, going back and picking her up and seeing myself in her. And I had no one growing up. And this dog's got no one. And I sort of made her that promise. I wanted to bring her back to my house, give her a better life, whatever that may be. And here I was feeling like I'd let her down, like I'd been let down growing up by many different people, many different things in my journey. And that was the driver. That was the real driver. And I really don't know how I would have got on with things or picked up the pieces if we hadn't have found her. And that was the best day of my life. We'd get a phone call to say, hey, this little dog had followed a man and his son through a park, and they'd seen the posters up everywhere saying Gobi was missing. They took her home and they tried to convince me it was Gobi. And I was, by this stage, like, that's not Gobi. Like, you're just trying to trick us for the money. I was so hesitant to go around there. And thankfully, some of the search and volunteer team say, we've got to go around and see. And we decide to get in the car and see for ourselves. And we walk into the family's home, and over the other side of the room, there she is. And she comes running towards me, but she's barking, yelping, and whining like she did on the water crossing that day as well. It was, I mean, my wife's not here right now, besides our wedding day, of course. This was the best day of my life, finding this little dog.
So
Wow.
that dog, Gobi knew, by the way, the dog's name is Gobi, if we haven't made that clear enough. The dog knew, and you knew right away as soon as you saw each other.
She'd unfortunately been hit by a car, so she had this big head wound. She did look a little different because of this head wound. I knew straight away it was her. But the state she was in, this disheveled state, this pain she was in, just made me not. It just made me think, wow, this dog's not the same as the dog just 6 weeks earlier, because she'd been through so much, being out on the streets. It was the real sad part of it as well.
Dion, there is the third hinge point. There's only 3 in this story. It looks like I stop at 3. It was, the crossing of that river, and then this moment of reuniting and looking at each other, and now she's in a tough spot. She needs some medical treatment. She needs to be rescued, certainly. Even more so than crossing a river, she needs to be rescued. And
Yeah,
here
so
you come. And she felt safe at that moment.
now I have to ring my employers again and say, well, I found the dog. Would you mind if I stayed out here a little longer? Remember, I mentioned earlier, it's 90 days for the blood test. Well, she also needed this injury fixed. So she had a bad leg injury. I stay out in Beijing for another 4 months, getting Gobi fixed up with a leg injury, getting a pet passport so she can get on the plane and travel home with me. So yeah, I fly home, and it was literally 6 months to the day earlier. The dog was chewing on my shoes on day 2 of the race until we got home. And it was just unbelievable to have her finally, walking through our front door of our house in Edinburgh, in Scotland.
Did you have the next?
No,
I thought you said you did.
No. I mentioned hinge point.
Oh, okay. So Dion, success. You got the operation. The dog is better now. Passes all the tests, and you fly back to Scotland. What happens then?
Well, Gobi's story goes around the world again. Gobi's been found, and it's like viral again. News media coverage, the story goes crazy. And then I start to get approached by all the big publishing houses to write a book about the story. And I picked up a deal with HarperCollins, and the second largest publisher in the world, who wanted to have a book for the whole family to read. So it's available in a picture book, a chapter book, and a main edition. And if I hadn't have gone back and picked Gobi up, as we said, I wouldn't be here speaking with you today. I wouldn't have this opportunity to write a book. And it's now in 24 languages, New York Times bestseller, been made into a Hollywood movie as we speak as well. And that's the life-changing moment. Just by being kind, that's all I thought. I thought, I've got to help the dog across the water. And of course it leads to more, but you just never know where life's going to take you. And in Australia, when you finish grade 7, you go straight to high school. My grade 7 teacher, the last day of school, said to me, the next place he thought he would see me would be in prison. No one ever expected me to do anything in life, be anything. I should still be working in that meat factory. I used to date a girl who her father worked there for 50 years. That was expected of me. And I know he must have been 60 or 70 when he was teaching me. There's no way he would have read the book, but I'd love for him just to have seen the journey that I'd taken, because it was such a mean thing to say. It's such a horrible thing, and it's always stuck with me. And it's always just now the part of like, wow, you just never know where life's going to take you.
And so inspiring for all of us that are working through whatever or trying to on our journey in life. We have Gobi that was without an owner and without any hope, and just running along hoping for a little more jerky that somebody passes so he can or she can continue with this race. And you leaving seventh grade told that, and that teacher should not be a teacher to tell you that next place I'm going to see you is prison is a tough thing to hear for a person in seventh grade. And as it turns out, Gobi's a big star, and you're winning races and a big star yourself now. And it's just, you never know what lies inside of somebody until you give them a shot. Yes, Scott?
I was going to say, I think it's fascinating that hinge point at the river, you were focused on winning. You're going up against these two guys, and the only focus you have is winning, and you chose kindness. And because of the kindness, that's changed your life. Winning that race wouldn't have meant anything to you. Maybe you would have got another 6 months or a year of a sponsored shoe contract or something like that. But it was kindness that changed your life. And I think that is something that we can all remember. Choose kindness.
And it changed my perspective, not only on life, but going to the races after that. I found like I didn't have this negative energy like I mentioned before. I was always taking stuff out of the basement, out of myself, like all the things people said or done to me. That fired me up. It angered me, right? I went through the Gobi race, and suddenly I found something there, happiness, joy, that kindness you mentioned, and it switched me completely. So after that race, I really struggled at a few races afterwards to really find what was my why. Why am I out here now? I'm not the angry runner I was anymore. So it took a moment to appreciate then the people, the beauty of the scenery, the journey and adventure I'm on. And that's what I really get out of it now more than I ever did previously. So Gobi's helped me a lot.
Do you think Gobi had this plan all along? You were selected out of 101 runners and said, you know what, Dion, that's the person I need to help. This was a master plan by Gobi, and knew that you needed this, and that if she put herself in that spot, that it could happen.
I would love to ask her. That would be the first question I would ask, is why me? And that would be phenomenal to understand. One of the reasons may be that when we're running these races, in particular stage races, they make you usually wear your country that you're representing in little badges on your shoulder. So I have the Australian badges on, even though most of my last 20 years I've lived in the UK. I represent Australia when I run these races. So I don't know, maybe Gobi also thought, well, if I pick up with him, we're going to live in Australia. We'll be on the beaches of Australia. We're going to have the best life ever. And then she actually ends up in Edinburgh, Scotland, where it's raining all the time. She's like, oh, darn, I've made the wrong choice here.
I should have picked the other Australian.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if you could ask her that question, I think she'd look right back at you with those big eyes and say, are you kidding me? You have to ask. Look what happened. Of course, this is why I did it.
And she's been to 13 different countries now. We've been in the US the last 5 years, visited 34 states. We've met the royal family. We've met 2 presidents, movie stars, music stars, lots of different celebrities. Been on incredible journeys sharing our story. And just over the weekend, we were in Bend in Oregon, like sharing the story with children and adults. And it's unbelievable just where this has all gone from that one act of kindness.
You have the children's version of the book, and you said when you wrote it, you wanted to make it a family book. When you go to these schools and speak to the children, what's your message?
The first thing is kindness. Be kind, and it costs nothing to be kind to another human being or to an animal. Teamwork, overcoming adversity, resilience. There's so many different connections, friendship. Of course, you're learning about different countries like China, You're
Mm-hmm.
learning about the ultra marathons, animals as well. And I think there's just so many different little touch points. The kids that read the chapter book love reading about Gobi's story, and they learn a few things along the way as well about themselves. And if I'm at a school, I'm asking them at that river crossing, what would you do? Would you take the lead? Would you go back and get the dog? And 99% of them are saying, well, I'd go back and get the dog. Then I push it further and I'm like, well, why would you get the dog? And these are when you get the best answers. You know, some of them are, well, she's a cute dog. And I'm like, I can't disagree with that, right? But some of them are really thought out answers of winning isn't everything. And for
Wow.
me, that's just the best answer when I hear someone say that, because we're all drilled from a very young age. Winning is everything, you know, win at all costs. And here I am, like, asking these kids, and they've got this thought of going back and helping the dog because they don't care about winning. You know, they want to make sure the dog's safe. And that for me is a big tick. I'm like, perfect. You know, I love sharing the story because of that.
And Gobi would have said, or would say, that I chose you because you not only carried me across this frozen river, but you also carried our story to all of these school sites and touched all of these people. That's why I picked you.
Yeah, and I've had people overweight email me, meet me saying, I've lost a lot of weight. I've got into running. I'm leading a completely different life. I was in Slovenia with a book launch many years ago, and this about 10 people came up to me. They were all men. They're in a drug rehabilitation center. They'd read the book. The book had come out a few months earlier. I was coming a few months later for the launch of the book, like the official launch. They'd read the book. They decided to sign up to the marathon in Ljubljana together, the 10 of them, because they got so inspired by the change that I'd had in life. And that's what they were going through in their own way as well, right? They connect with the story that they're going to run this marathon race. And I ran the 10K race the day before with Gobi. And on the day of the marathon race, the next day, I went there and cheered them all on, and they all finished. And I was just like blown away. And it's like, how can my story touch someone? And it's not just about me. I think we all have this ability to be able to share and encourage others. And, you know, we're all able to do amazing and wonderful things as well with the right support around us and the right belief inside us.
You say that you worked in the corporate world prior to this big blow up, and you now go to corporate events and you speak to corporations, these, you know, big powered CEOs and administrators. What message do you have for them that came out of the Finding Gobi story? What can businesses and leaders learn from this?
You know, I think that's the thing. There's so many connections with running ultra marathons to business, and it all becomes from winding it back before even the race. It's the preparation, it's the planning, it's all the time you spend out there training, and that's what any good business does as well. And then it's leading through the race and overcoming adversity and pushing your limits and really digging deep than you ever have before. And it's not knowing sometimes if you're going to be able to pick yourself up and get to the finish line. I've just recently come back from running the Gobi 400-kilometer race. It's a 250-mile non-stop race. I hadn't run a race since Badwater 2020, where I came sixth. I was running well, and I didn't really know where running was actually taking me over the last couple of years. I wasn't really sort of inspired to get out there and run anything. This race ticked all the boxes. I go out there and I still think I'm the runner I am in 2020, and I find myself really struggling. Takes me a lot longer than I thought. And at times throughout the race, I'm considering quitting. Like, I just don't think I can make it to the finish line. So sometimes you also have to realize, like, during these races, like during business, the same plans don't always work. You're not who you were many years ago, and you need to keep changing and evolving and keep working hard. And I wasn't doing any of those things. I had an amazing time and I finished the race. But afterwards, as with any business results, it's like reflecting back on them. What could we do better? What could we change? How can we improve as a business? How can we improve as persons as well? That's what I always find about myself at these races. So there's so many different connections, and there's already so many connections we've spoken about today with life's journey. Many people in the crowd, they're not going to be ultra marathon runners, but if they're listening to my story, they don't have to be. It's like the life journey that I had as the childhood, or through my 20s and early 30s, being overweight and having those struggles, dealing with those demons, and then finding running as my thing that changes me. It could be knitting, it could be painting, it could be being on a sailboat, it could be learning a different language, right? There's so many different things that you could pick up to improve yourself or to change a situation that you might be in currently.
And I think that we recently did a three or four part podcast series on stoicism. The object is the way, and the whole point of that is you can't control what situations you get put in, but you can control over how you react. And Dion, what a great example you've set. You didn't have a great childhood, and you could have just used that as an excuse and rolled over and worked in the meat factory. But you decided, you know what, that's not me. That's not what I want to do. And you've made choices. You made a choice, like Don said, all of these hinge points, you made the choice and you had control over that.
Yeah. Ultra running has really developed that, just an average person going out there and learning about myself throughout all of these races has really developed that skill as well, being a lot more patient. If I'm in the queue at Walmart and there's 10 people ahead of me and some old ladies there paying with 1 cent coins, and I'm not getting frustrated. I'm thinking, well, I've been out doing ultra marathons. This is easy, right? I can get through lining up in this queue now. And it's funny, that's just a simple little example, but you can just use so many different elements of running ultra marathons in day-to-day life and business as well, and it does make you a better person for it as well.
Dion, I've thought of that as well, where you are in a waiting room to get to go see the doctor or to get your oil changed, and I think about that moment, and think, I wish I could get past this, but then I think how much I would love to have a chair when I'm in the middle of a long slog and it's hot and I'm thirsty and all of those things are happening to me. I would love to be in an air-conditioned room with a little bit of entertainment going on, and I'm told just to sit there and wait my turn. That's pretty nice. And I think about that when I'm in that moment where I have to sit and wait my turn. I think, this is kind of nice. I've longed for this when I'm struggling out there. This isn't that bad.
And isn't it funny when we finish these long distance races that suddenly, like the next day, you're already thinking, oh, what's next? After the Gobi race, like I'm thinking, that's it. I'm going back into retirement. I'm done with this. And on the way home, someone sends me an email saying there's a race across Panama, 100-mile race from point to point. Would you be interested? And it's like, oh, maybe. Always want to go to
point
Panama.
to point. It's a point to point.
Yeah. And you can't say no to that, can you? And it's like, and then you're like, I forgot about the feet pain, the struggles, how much I hated it at times and wish I was getting my oil changed. So, yeah.
It sounds like Gobi had a pretty good time out there. I think it naturally an ultra runner, fit well into the community, was shared jerky out of people's packs. Do you think this was Gobi's first race at that Gobi Desert? You think she just showed up by chance, or do you think this is her annual trek?
Well, the funny thing was, like, through that 6-week period when she's missing, no one ever came forward to say, that's my dog. There was no 8-year-old boy crying on the phone saying, you've stolen my puppy. No one ever came forward saying, that's my dog. We left her out in the desert, or she ran off. And I was kind of always surprised about that. I don't think Gobi is a real ultramarathon lover anymore. She likes the more 5-kilometer races now, and hiking is more her bag now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, the book or the books are available. I have not read it, admittedly. I have not read it, but through this discussion, Dion, I'm going to get the book and I'm going to read it, because I think that there's a lot more lessons and a lot more details that are in this story that we've just barely touched on.
And it's
so
Christmas.
I'm very excited to get it.
And it's Christmas season.
Good point.
You need you need a stocking stuffer. You need a gift for a grandchild or your own child. I mean, it's a conversation starter about kindness and perseverance, and it's all in there. And you could share some of our own stories and maybe even plant a seed for being a runner in the future when you buy that book.
My grade 8 teacher actually read it a couple of years ago, and she emailed our website and she said, "Look, I'm really sorry to hear about your childhood and just what you've been going through." And she said, "There was always something about you, but I didn't share, of course, this with anyone. I didn't want to end up in child services, so I kept my childhood real close to me." And she said, "I read the book and I just would love to have been able to help you." And then at the end, she said, "The English in the book's really good too." So it was amazing to sort of hear, her sort of thoughts on just how great the book is and the journey as well. And yeah, I love sharing it. So thank you
And
for
we
having
can
me
look
on.
around at others in our community and realize they might be hiding that story, that there may be something there to start a conversation and lend a hand when the person that's affected by it is afraid to bring it out, just for all the reasons you talked about. But we can all learn to
And
be better people and through this example.
yeah, writing the book for me has been that real process. It went through so many different drafts, and I had to share so much with people to share my journey, to be able to connect with the Gobi story. And it was a really good thing for me to be able to do. And it's not to say everyone can't do this, right? It doesn't have to be a full-on book. It could be just pages and paragraphs. But it's a really good process to be able to write down your thoughts sometimes and to see where you've come from. Everyone's achieved something pretty amazing.
Well, I'm looking at this, and the obvious story is an overweight, chain smoking drinker becomes an endurance champion. But then I also look at it and I go, somebody that didn't get good grades and maybe shouldn't even have graduated or gone to high school writes a New York best-selling book. I mean, you've overcome the odds, Dion, and thank you for setting that example for the rest of us.
Oh, thanks. And, as I've said earlier, just an average person, and just hope that people can be inspired by my journey and pick up something for themselves, and not a dog, of course, but just, pick up on something throughout the story that they might connect to. And, maybe it changes someone else's life as well.
Now, Dion, I watched your running gait as I watched some YouTube clips. You're not the average runner. You've got some nice gait there, and no surprise, you found your way to the front of the finish line. You're a natural athlete.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know. There's, look, a bit of hard work, a lot of mental strength there that pushes me on to being a bit better than average, I think, is a better way to word it.
Nice. Humble
So
too.
the book is called Finding Gobi. We'll put a couple links. There's findinggobi.com and also dionleonard.com. We'll leave those in the show notes. I think you can buy the book on Amazon too if you want it on your doorstep next day delivery. Dion, thanks for sharing your story. Boy, had a great time talking to you today.
Thanks, Scott and Don. I really appreciate being on the show, and it was fantastic to chat to you all as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate it. So, as we say, go out and run
Mas.